Hey y'all, Melissa of Melly Sews with you today, and today's project is secret pajamas for the holidays. These are stretch velvet jogger pants, and of course you can sew these out of any kind of stretch material. I am using a pattern from my shop called the Sky Joggers, and I've got information below about where you can go and get that pattern, and then I'll take you step by step through how to sew these. So the first thing after cutting out all of our pattern pieces is that we are going to work on the pocket. So this edge is the pocket edge, and here are my pocket facings, and I'm going to place the pocket facings right sides together with that pocket edge, and then I'm going to stitch right along here. Once you have sewn the pocket seam, then the next step is going to be to turn it to the wrong side, and you want to press this edge and then top stitch it if desired. So once that's done, it will look like this. I've used my cover stitch machine to top stitch here. You could also use any other type of stretch stitch you like. Once that is top stitched, then turn this to the wrong side here with the pocket facing right side up, and then you want to align the pocket piece. So there's an outer curve here, that's the outer hip, and we want to worry about these inside edges. So here and here. Align those, and you're going to go ahead and stitch these two edges. Once you have the pockets sewn to the pocket facings, this is what it's going to look like. And you want to go ahead and add some pins or basting stitches on the side seam and the top edge to keep the pockets in place for the next several steps. After you've got that done, you want to go ahead and place your two front pieces right sides together, and we're going to stitch this front crotch curve. While I've got that ready to go, let's go ahead and get the same thing ready on the back of the pants, so we can do them both at once. So we're going to take the pants back pieces and place those right sides together and stitch the back crotch curve as well. So we'll stitch right there and then move on to the next step. Once we have sewn those crotch curves, here's what it looks like. This is the front, and here is the back. And you're going to want to open your pants up now, and then we're going to start matching down the side seams and the inseams. I like to do the side seams first. So when you're matching the front to the back, this is where you're going to be matching the pocket at the top, and then you're sewing through several layers, and then below that it's just the leg. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the pants. And then we're going to match up the inseam, and what I do is I like to take one of the crotch seams, point it one way, and the other point it the other way. If you did not use a serger here though, you can also just open up both seams and then match down the inseam. Grab another handful of clips and match the other side of the inseam. Alright, so now that we've got these all clipped together, we're going to sew down the two side seams and then we're going to go all the way across the inseam in one long seam. All right, once you've sewn those side seams and inseams, this is what the pants look like. And we're going to go ahead and turn them right side out because all we have left is the waistband and the ankle bands. So here they are right side out, and I'm going to set these aside for now. So here is my waistband, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm marking the center front of it. And then the first thing I'm going to want to do on that center front line is I'm going to need to make a buttonhole so that the drawstring has a place to go in and out. So what I like to do is fold the waistband as it's going to be once it's finished. Make sure that I'm matching up those raw edges, which is a little difficult with this fabric because it's kind of slippery. Then I'm going to get my ruler. And what I want to do with the ruler first is measure up that center front portion there. Okay, and as you can see, it's 2 3/4. There is a 1/2 inch seam allowance in this pattern, so I want to first take out that 1/2 inch that's going to be lost to the seam allowance. That would be to here, and that leaves me with 2 1/4 inches. And I want to center my buttonhole for the drawstrings in the middle of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark here at 1 1/8 that is the center. Okay, so I've got my buttonhole foot on my machine, and I'm setting this to a 1/2 inch wide buttonhole. And then on the back of my fabric, I've gone ahead and added some fusible interfacing on the back of that buttonhole area. So I'm just going to line up my mark here and stitch that buttonhole. And go ahead and fold the waistband in half, matching the short edges. And I want to stitch down that short edge to form a loop. After the waistband is sewn into a loop, this is what it's going to look like. And then we want to go ahead and take the pants, and we're going to match up. We want to make sure the buttonhole side is facing towards the top. We're going to match up the seam with the back, center back seam on the pants. And then we want to match up the buttonhole area with center front. And then pin the rest of the way around the waistband or clip. Okay, once you have that waistband all clipped or pinned on, you're going to sew once all the way around. All right, once we've sewn the waistband on, here's what it looks like. And then what I want to do is start folding the waistband down just so that I cover that seam and pinning it to cover it. Alright, once I have that all pinned, I'm going to move over to my sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the bottom edge here to form the waist casing. I am going to leave a gap on one end to be able to insert the elastic for the next step. Once you have the waistband sewn on, then it's time to insert the elastic. So I've got my elastic. This tool is called a bodkin. It just clamps on and that slides to keep it pulled on, and I'm going to insert that elastic through the casing using that gap I left. Okay, once I get that elastic back all the way around, I'm going to very slightly overlap these ends, and I will stitch across here with a zigzag stitch, and then also the opening in the casing closed. Okay, here is what the waistband looks like after I've got the elastic in and the casing sewn shut. Now let's head over to the machine and I'll show you how to sew the extra top stitching onto this casing. Okay, over at the sewing machine, I'm going to put this presser foot onto my machine. This one has a seam guide on it that's going to be really handy for sewing this type of top stitching. My machine is set for a regular straight stitch and the longest length that I can do on my machine. The reason we don't have to do a stretch stitch is because we're going to be stretching the fabric as we stitch this. Okay, I've got my pants inside out because that way I can put the presser foot on the inside and give them a good several tugs to make sure that the casing is distributed evenly around the elastic. And then what I am going to do is I'm going to start with the first line of casing. These are 1/8 of an inch, so I'm going to measure 3/8 of an inch beyond the needle. So 1, 2, 3, and that is where I want the edge of my fabric to stay lined up. I'm going to put the needle down, and then I am going to stretch as I stitch. All right, and now I am ready to move it again and do the next line of stitching. Before I do that, I want to double check where my buttonhole is to make sure that my stitching is going to be close to the buttonhole. So it looks like the buttonhole, if I line it up right on the edge of the presser foot here, I want to be stitching halfway in the middle. So I'm going to line up to this line on the presser foot. And you can start in the front if it's easier to match your buttonhole that way. And what I'm lining up to the presser foot is my previous line of stitching, not the edge of the fabric. But once I get that on the correct 1/8 inch mark, then I'm also looking at the outside edge. So I have 2 reference points to make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, once I've gotten those channels sewn, I'm going to go back to the buttonhole side to measure again. And it looks like in order to clear the buttonhole, I'm going to want to keep the previous line of stitching matched up to the last mark on my foot. All right, one last line of stitching, and I want to be halfway in between the casing stitch and this stitch. So that means this is the halfway point on my foot, and that means that's where I want that line of stitching to be lined up. Okay, once you've sewn that casing, here's what it looks like. Let me turn this right side out. And I've got my buttonhole here. So all I need to do to complete the drawstring casing is get whatever cording or ribbon that I'm going to use for the drawstring and insert it through that channel. For ribbon length, I like to take the hip measurement and add about 18 inches to it. so that I'll have enough hanging out to tie. And then I like to knot the ends of my ribbon or drawstring to help prevent fraying and also to help keep the ribbon from pulling through the hole. It also helps if you're using ribbon if you cut at an angle on the ends. It helps with fraying. So there we go. There is my drawstring waistband with top stitching on the casing. To do the leg bands, what you're going to want to do first is fold the band right sides together, and you're going to stitch down the short edge. Once the leg bands are sewn, you're going to want to turn them so that they are wrong sides together, and you fold them into a leg cuff like this. Once you have both of the leg cuffs folded, you're going to want to put them around the legs of the pants. Now you're going to notice that the cuff is not as wide as the pants, and that's by design so that the pants will get cinched in to that cuff. So what you want to do is match the seam allowance up. I like to match it to the inner side. You can go with the outer side too. Doesn't really matter. And then take the opposite side and match it up to the seam allowance on the opposite side of the pants. Now I only put 2 pins or clips in those 2 areas because what I'm going to do when I get to the machine is stretch the pants so that they will fit, the band will fit around the leg. Alright, here's how we sew the cuffs on. First, I like to put the presser foot inside the circle of the cuff. Make sure all 3 of your layers are matched, and then I try to get as close as I can to where I've pinned or clipped the cuff. And I leave that clipper pin in until I catch the fabric and start trimming with my serger. If you're doing this on a regular sewing machine, it won't trim, but you still want to leave the clipper pin in until the needle catches. Once I've got the needles into the fabric, then I can remove the clips and I can start stretching my cuff as I sew. And I'm only stretching until the cuff lays flat against the pant leg. Once you have the cuffs sewn on the leg bands, here is what they're going to look like, and then you just pull them down, and you can see how that pulled in the fabric around the ankles.